eggnog is really, really good to try. So I'm gonna try doing this recipe. Welcome in YouTube to another video of food. This time it's about eggnog. More specifically, the Great Eggnog Riot at West Point Military Academy. In the great hopes that this also has a recipe in it, because obviously I have not watched the video yet. But let's sit down and listen and learn and watch.
If you've never had real homemade eggnog, you have got to try it. It is so much better than anything that you can buy at the store. It's so good that in 1826, when it was taken away from the cadets at West Point, they made their own, got wasted on it, and started a riot, destroying a building and nearly killing one of their officers. So I'll be making a 19th century recipe for eggnog to see just what all the fuss was about. So thank you to ButcherBox for sponsoring this video as we make eggnog worthy of a riot. This time on Drinking History.
I'm gonna finally learn how to make it.
Way back when I first started the channel, and I talked about the history of the drink in that video, but I left out any mention of the eggnog riot. And since I wanted to tell this story, I figured I would do a new recipe for eggnog, old recipe for eggnog, specifically the recipe that I have in the Tasting History cookbook, which makes an excellent holiday gift. This recipe is based on one from the 1887 edition of the White House cookbook, eggnog. Beat the yolks of 12 eggs very light, stir in as much white sugar as
12 eggs? How much eggnog are you making?
They will dissolve. Pour in gradually 1 glass of brandy to cook the egg, 1 glass of old whiskey, 1 grated nutmeg, and 3 pints of rich milk. Beat the whites to a froth and stir in last. Nice and simple, but also nice and boozy. This recipe
nice and simple. I'm just like, I don't have like alcohol in my house because I don't drink. Can I have an alcohol-free eggnog? Is it still eggnog if it's alcohol-free?
Is not specific in how much alcohol to add, but I looked at other recipes from the period and they add a lot. So if you don't want as much, then you can cut back the quantities that I'm going to give you. But for this recipe, what you need...
Paws wants an eggnog. Oh my god. Oh.
Is 3/4 of a cup or 150 grams of granulated sugar, 1 quart or 1 liter of whole milk, 2 cups or 475 milliliters of heavy cream,
That's a lot
1.5 cups or 350 milliliters
That's a lot of brandy.
1.5 cups or 350 milliliters of rye whiskey, a whole nutmeg.
Rye whiskey? Aw, a whole nutmeg? Holy shit, I've never seen a whole, like an actual nutmeg. That's the first time I actually see one.
Egg or 2 or 3 teaspoons of ground nutmeg, and a dozen medium or 10 large eggs divided into yolks and whites. So when I was testing this recipe for the cookbook a few years ago, I used egg whites. But they're uncooked egg whites, and since then I've become oddly allergic to uncooked egg whites. So I'm going to be using aquafaba today. It literally means bean water, and it's made from the viscous liquid, or it just is the viscous liquid that you get from cooked chickpeas. The thing is, they act and taste pretty much just like egg whites, especially once they're whipped, so I doubt I'll notice the difference, but I guess I'll see when I taste it. I'm really glad I'm not allergic to egg yolks because there isn't a great substitute for those. I'm also glad I'm not allergic to meat, specifically the wonderful meats that were sent to me from today's sponsor, ButcherBox. ButcherBox is a monthly subscription service that delivers top-quality proteins like grass-fed beef, free-range chicken, and wild-caught seafood right to your door. And they have all sorts of cuts, so you can customize your order to fit your preferences.
That's kind of cool having your butcher deliver you.
One of my favorite meats because it's so succulent and tender.
Oh man,
and
that looks so nice.
Difficult to find where I live. I guess it's very popular in New England.
Just like, gum.
But they're great for an easy and quick dinner. It's just steak, onion, garlic butter, you're done. And the meat from ButcherBox is sustainably sourced and the subscriptions are really flexible. You can skip or even pause and order absolutely no problem. And when they are delivered, it's always with free shipping. And right now, when you use my code TastingHistory, new users will get $20 off of their first box, plus a full year of free premium steaks in each box. Your choice of New York strip steak, ribeye, or filet mignon for free for a full year. So just click the link in the description and use my code TastingHistory to get yourself some free steak. Steak that will hopefully go well with eggnog. I think anything will go well with eggnog, but I guess we'll see. So first beat the yolks until they are a pale yellow, and then as you continue
Oh
beating,
damn, that looks
add about
really
a third
nice.
of the sugar, then beat it until it's incorporated, then add another third and beat, and finally that last third of sugar and beat. And if
Okay,
you
that
want, you
sounds
can
really
continue
simple and
adding
easy to
sugar
make.
just until it doesn't dissolve anymore. You want it nice and thick so it leaves a ribbon pattern when it drizzles from the whisk. Once you've added all your sugar, slowly pour in the brandy, all while beating the eggs, then add in the whiskey in the same way, and then stir in the milk, and finally the heavy cream. Then you're going to add the nutmeg, and you're going to stir it, but it's not really going to dissolve. Just keep stirring to at least incorporate it, even if it doesn't all dissolve. Then it's time to whisk your egg whites, or in my case, the aquafaba. But what's crazy is they act pretty much the same way. So whisk them up until you have a nice soft peak, and then add about a third of them and gently fold them into the eggnog until everything is nice and smooth. Then repeat this with the next third and the next. And that's your nog. Pretty much. You actually
That
can
sounds
drink
really
it
easy
right
to make,
now,
honestly.
but it is going to be much better if you leave it in a cool place like the refrigerator for at least 4 hours, but preferably for
So you
2
wanna
or 3
chill it.
days. One, that is going
2 or 3 days? I'm just like, huh? That was a long time. I best get to making it now if I wanted for New Year.
to let the alcohol kind of mellow, but it's also going to let the flavors develop, leaving you with an eggnog worthy of rioting. Which, my dear viewer, brings us to the Eggnog Riot of 1826.
Riot! Let's go!
'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through West Point, all the students were wasted, about to tear up the joint. Though actually the story of the Eggnog Riot starts not at Christmas, but on the 4th of July in 1825. See,
What?
at the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York, alcohol was strictly prohibited to the cadets. But Superintendent Colonel Sylvanus Thayer, who was notoriously strict, did allow the privilege of a holiday tipple on the 4th of July and on Christmas Eve, the latter being in the form of eggnog. But being a bunch of college students, on the 4th of July in 1825, one drink turned into many drinks and everybody got drunk and they performed a snake dance, whatever that is, but it culminated in them taking the commandant of the school and putting him on their shoulders and carrying him off somewhere. It got Thayer pretty angry because that's not how West Point cadets
got
should
really
behave.
drunk.
And so he decided no more alcohol, either at the 4th of July or at Christmas. Well, when you tell a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds that they can't have something, they are going to be bound and determined to have exactly that thing. And the nearest place to procure liquor, chiefly whiskey, were 2 nearby taverns, the North Tavern and Benny Havens. Now these places were strictly off limits to cadets, but that never really stopped them from going. It just meant that they couldn't get caught being there. There was one student who was caught, and he was actually the first student to be arrested for going to Benny Havens. And then he was almost caught again in August of 1826, but he was warned that an officer was on his way, so he left in the dark, drunk, and fell down a 60-foot ravine. He spent 4 months in the hospital, and that cadet was none other than Jefferson Davis, future president of the Confederate States of America. And what did he do almost as soon as he did get out of the hospital? Well, he started to help smuggle in liquor to make a Christmas eggnog.
No
Leading up
way!
to Christmas Eve, Davis and a bunch of his friends started sneaking in little bits of alcohol here and there. They had some wine, they had some brandy, at least 1 gallon of rum, another gallon of decent whiskey, and 2 gallons of cheap whiskey, though actually the cheap whiskey ended up not being so cheap because they had to cross the Hudson to get it, and when they came back, there was a private who was guarding the docks who was going to rat him out. So
they had to bribe the dude. Oh, damn. Ain't that a story for the ages? No matter where you are, in what century or what happens, you still gotta bribe someone. And the cost increases. Oh, we're having a history lesson in a riot for eggnog, yeah.
they had to bribe him with 35 cents to keep his mouth shut. They also started stealing little bits of food and sneaking it in from the kitchens so they wouldn't be drinking on an empty stomach, which just seems sensible. And they even got a big piece of mutton from Benny Havens when they realized that he was going to charge them way too much for the whiskey. Now, when the party started around midnight on Christmas Eve, it was a pretty small affair. It was 9 students in one room.
Oh yeah, I've heard that one before. Oh yeah, let's have a little party. Just it's cozy. Just a few people here and there. Word gets out and suddenly you have freaking 300 people.
28 of the North Barracks. As it happens with all college-age parties, it started to grow and expand into the halls and everything, and by 2 a.m. they were getting a little bit loud. So one of the students is like, everybody, quiet down. You're gonna wake the officers. And they did get quiet, but as it happens, they started to get louder and louder again, and at 4 o'clock they were so loud that they woke up Captain Ethan Allen Hitchcock, who was in his room on the ground floor. Now the thing is, both Hitchcock and even Thayer knew that the cadets were sneaking in alcohol. They thought they were real sneaky, but it was pretty obvious.
Oh man, when you realize as a student that you're not actually sneaky and they actually know what you're doing. Yeah. It wouldn't be the first time it happened to me.
What they were doing, but they kind of thought, all right, we'll let it slide. We'll
Yeah, they
look
just
the other
ignore
way.
it.
It can't get crazy. But when Hitchcock was woken up at 4 a.m., he's like, no, absolutely not. So he goes upstairs, and one of the first rooms he checks is 28, and there are a bunch of students in there who are drunk. A couple of them are even passed out. And he's like, you guys, you have to go to bed. This is done. Go to bed. And supposedly they do, so he thinks he's all good, and so he goes back downstairs,
oh no,
goes back to bed. A few minutes later, he gets a knock at the door. He gets up out of bed, goes to check the door, and there's nobody there. Okay, goes back to bed.
Oh no, they're doing the freaking pranking with the knock-knocks. Oh, they really are drunk kids.
Falls asleep, hears another knock at the door, gets back up, opens the door, there's nobody there. This happens a third time, and he's like, all right, clearly it's a ding-dong ditch. So this time he shuts the door, but waits near the door, and when somebody knocks again, he opens the door just in time to see a bunch of students hooping and hollering, running down the hall, and now he's pissed. So he storms upstairs, and he finds a room with 13 cadets who are clearly wasted, and
you know, the saying, don't poke the bear. Yeah.
he says, hand over the liquor, and they refuse to do so, and so he reads them the Riot Act. Well, just then, Jefferson Davis busts into the room, and he's like, everybody put the alcohol away, Old Hitch is coming, only to realize that Old Hitch was already there. So now Hitchcock puts all of them under arrest, and by under arrest, I mean he tells them once again to go to bed, because what is he going to do? He can't really arrest them all. Says go to bed, and some of them do. Actually, Jefferson Davis goes back to his dorm, supposedly gets sick and passes out, so he's not involved in anything after this point. Well, okay. Captain Hitchcock thinks that everything is kind of handled, and so he goes back down and he thinks this is the end. But it was only the beginning. See, one of the students who clearly couldn't handle his liquor was said to have gathered a bunch of the other cadets and said, get your dirks and bayonets and pistols if you have them.
Oh no!
Before this night is over, Hitchcock will be dead. Well, now the riot has truly begun, and at 5 a.m., another officer, Lieutenant William Thornton, is awoken by the beating of a drum because some of the drunk students had taken a drum from one of the cadets who was on sentry duty.
That's a
the drum
mess.
was there to alert people to danger. They took it, and they're just walking around banging on a drum. So he gets up and goes to the dormitory only to be accosted by a cadet with a sword. And now you've got a bunch of cadets, dozens of them, running around with swords, and some of them have pistols and bayonets. Everything is falling apart. They're breaking windows, especially in Hitchcock's room, though he's not actually in the room.
Note to self, don't give cadets alcohol. Clearly, they become rabid. What the heck, man? That escalated so hard.
So Hitchcock finds a room that he knows a bunch of cadets are in because he can hear them because they're all drunk, but they have barricaded the door shut. So he's kicking at it and finally kicks it open, only to have one of the cadets raise a pistol and shoot it. And luckily, another cadet knocked his arm before he did it, and so the bullet didn't hit Hitchcock. It hit the door jamb right next to him. But at this point, Captain Hitchcock's like, yeah, I'm done, and I'm going to get help. The gun also brought the attention of Lieutenant Thornton, who had just left the student with the sword, and so he's running to where he heard the gunfire, only to be accosted by yet another cadet, this one wielding a log of some sort, and he hits Thornton and knocks him out unconscious. By now, Hitchcock has left the door.
Wow, this turned into an actual shit show. God damn. All this because of Eggnog?
Dormitory, and he comes up to the cadet who was on sentry duty, the one who had lost his drum, and says, go fetch the comm. The comm being Commandant William Worth. But some nearby drunk cadets thought he said, fetch the bomb, meaning the bombardiers. And so what do you do when you think that a bunch of artillerymen are going to come accost you?
Oh no! Oh no.
Well, you head back to your dorm and you brace for impact. And that's exactly what they did. They went back and started knocking out windows and taking furniture and pushing it up against the doors. They tore off the banister of the stairway, really making this place a fort for an attack that absolutely was never coming. Well, at this point, Hitchcock is like, I don't know what to do. And so he didn't really do anything for a little while. And he didn't need to, because he barricaded themselves what a bunch of college-age students who were drunk were going to do as soon as the sun started to come up, which it was. They were going to pass out, and that's pretty much what happened. They all just kind of stopped. And finally, Commodore Worth comes, and he's like, I don't really know what to do either, but the sun's coming up, so let's call the bugler and have him do roll call.
Oh my god. Roll call just after people passed out from being drunk. Oh, that was a mess. It's kind of funny to have those in command literally be like, I don't know what to do, man. I've never had people disobey me like that before.
And so the bugle plays, and most of the students, even those who were involved in the riot, come out. They were like trained to do so, so they come out and line up on the lawn for roll call. And that was pretty much the end of the riot. And what's crazy is the rest of the day just went on as normal. They didn't really address it. Even Colonel Thayer was like, I don't know what to do, because there were so many students involved. There were about 90 involved, which was like a third of the school. What exactly do we do? And finally, after a few days, they realized that the most offensive students, about 20 of them, I think 19 of them actually, would be expelled. And some of these who were expelled included future governor of Mississippi, future generals of the Confederacy, even a future Supreme Court justice, though he wasn't actually expelled because he talked his way out of it before it happened. And many of those who were expelled were actually invited back the next year. Now, Jefferson Davis didn't have to face any repercussions because he passed out before the real rioting began, and there was another famous cadet who wasn't involved at all, but he was there at the time, and that was Robert E. Lee, who was said to have been kind of a nerd and wouldn't have gotten involved in something like this, but he did get involved in a rebellion some years later. But all in all, that was the end of the Eggnog riot.
Oh my god. Funny, like, history is so funny sometimes. You just have like these moments when you're like, yeah, we don't talk about what happened. It's also, I guess, like, they don't want to admit to it or like make a big case out of it because it's their skin, and the fact that they lost control is also damaging to them. So it kind of makes sense not to want to really push for justice there.
At least. And so I think that it's time to try our riot-worthy eggnog. So once it's had time to sit, ladle a bit into a glass, top it with some fresh nutmeg, and here we are. Homemade eggnog from 1887. Oh man, that looks so good. So mine's been sitting for a day, and you can see the froth stays. It just floats to the top, still really frothy. It did with this with the egg whites, and it did this with the aquafaba. Cheers.
Oh man, that looks so good. I want to try it.
That is boozy. It is boozy. You could add less. You could add more. If you wait a few days, it does mellow, I promise. But The flavor is this rich and creamy, nutmeggy flavor. The texture is wonderful. You can also serve it warm. I like it cold, but you can serve it warm. You can also switch the alcohols.
Oh.
Put some rum in there, or really whatever you want. You can also add some other spices if you want. They're not traditional at this time, but some cinnamon or cardamom, delicious. So this is definitely worth making this holiday season. It's not that hard. You can also make a smaller batch if you want. Cut everything in half because it does make quite a bit, but it's worth making.
Definitely smaller.
Yeah, I'll see you next time on Drinking History.
Because I don't know, like, it's my first time trying eggnog. I don't know if I'm gonna like it or not. I think halving it is probably a good idea. Yeah, I do want to try it though, so I will ask my friends if they have some brandy.
Stop, okay? No more. What the are your parents? Who are your parents? I'm gonna call Child Protective Services. It's
Wait!
time to stop.
No! 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 Fine, I'll try it without alcohol. Meanies. YouTube, if you managed to get this far, thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for watching. And let me know if you want to try it or if you have any cool recipes that you want to share. I love cooking stuff and I love watching cooking videos. They're great. Bye, YouTube.